Television, the most powerful communicator in the world. Do you know over 86 million American homes own, watch, hover over, fall asleep in front of, and sometimes even scream at the boob tube? What do you watch? Well, our next guests are responsible for some of the funniest, saddest, and in many cases off-the-wall programming and television choices on the dial. These four men represent four television production and television distribution companies, and as I introduce them, I'm certain you'll recognize many of the titles. Bob King, President of Distribution, Columbia Pictures Television, responsible for shows like T.J. Hooker, Heart to Heart, Benson's, Soap, Barney Miller, Ripley's Believe It or Not, and movies, many movies, some of them, The Natural, Jagged Edge, and among many other titles. Good morning to you, Bob. Nice to have you here. Sid Cohen, President of Distribution, King World. Shows like Nightlife with David Brenner, Oprah Winfrey, Wheel of Fortune, Jeopardy, among others. Good morning, Sid. Nice to have you here.
Thank you.
Barry Thurston, President of Syndication, Embassy Communications. Shows like Different Strokes, Sanford and Son, Maude, Good Times, The Jeffersons, One Day at a Time, Silver Spoons, Facts of Life, Who's the Boss, among others. Good morning to you, Barry. And finally, Joe Indelli, President of Distribution, MTM Productions. Shows like Bob Newhart Show, Rhoda, Lou Grant, WKRP Cincinnati, Hill Street Blues, Remington Steele, St. Elsewhere, among others. Good morning to you, Joe.
Morning,
Is there any
Ellie.
television left? You'd like to think not, right?
We hope so.
I mean, you really look like four bankers, I have to tell you. You are in the business of money. You're in economics, aren't you? Selling television?
That's the game.
It is the game. Let's start with you, Joe, because MTM has been called a quality production company, and I think all of you represent different types of television. But why don't we begin by taking a look at a little clip reel of your shows we put together, and we'll do that for all of you gentlemen before we're finished here today. So let's look at some of MTM's products.
I just met with the station manager, and Bev approved a statewide Vermont Today talent search for me. Hotels, mileage, the works.
We have plenty of good guests right in the area.
Well, Dick, Bev's not satisfied with the guests.
Since when?
Since I told her you're not satisfied.
Item 7. Yeah. Item 7. Item 7 is a hooker undercover targeting gays and regular johns in the vicinity of Green and Sycamore. Now, this traffic has been moving eastward ever since they started building the Decker Mall. Now, if we can just keep it moving east 2 more blocks, it's going to be over in the Heights.
That's just where it belongs.
That's right.
I challenge. There's no such word as dudder.
Oh, this puzzle was so stupid, Brenda. A pizza.
Was I also, juggling cheese balls? Terrific. So I'm fine just as long as I hang out with meat.
I'll give you some advice. Lock your doors and don't answer your telephone. Carlton, you have 1 hour to get me a cab. Go.
I love strong women.
Joe, both the sitcoms and the dramatic series seem to be aimed at a young and a thinking audience, I think. You don't use the 8th grade common denominator mentality when you put shows together. Why are they successful?
Basically, there are 3 elements to any show, Eileen. Likable characters, good writing, and production values, excellent production values. And that's the hallmark of the MTM company, always has been, and it always will be, and that's really what brings an audience to the set.
We're going to be talking a lot today about reruns, syndication, whatever you call it. It's the business of selling and reselling a show, a program. St. Elsewhere is scheduled to go on the block in '87. How do you know before you put it on the block that for reruns that it'll be successful?
You're never sure of any show, but there are certain hallmarks, certain guidelines that you can use in syndication to determine what a show will do given a certain day part. And based on those, it's mostly ratings and history, demographic history and so forth, you can get a pretty good feel for a show and a pretty good idea of where it'll play.
But isn't it interesting? Dynasty didn't do well in reruns, yet Facts of Life does really well. I mean, all of you gentlemen respond to this. What's the secret for success?
Writing.
Is it writing? Do you agree with that, Barry?
Well, I think a certain amount, writing, casting, there's no question that the show, the play is the thing, and I think that writing and casting are very, very important.
You agree, Sid?
Yeah, I think also where the show is placed is very important.
What do you mean by that?
Well, when you sell it in syndication, it's going to go into a different time period than what it is on the network, so therefore it's going to have different competition. It'll be on different types of stations, where it may be on a very strong network affiliate When it's on the network, it will then be perhaps on a weaker station, so that certainly doesn't help the show. So there are lots of factors that come into play when you talk about the success of a syndicated show.
It's interesting. Hill Street Blues was critically acclaimed, and yet the numbers were terrible when it was first on the network, and the network hung in there with it. Now, you're all talking about the gauges and the guidelines and what makes something successful and what doesn't. How long do you hang in with a program? When you sell it, if it's not working, how long, you've got money invested in it, how long do you stay, and when do you finally say, I'm shelving the show?
Depends upon the type of a show it is. If it's an off-network show, you sell it for a number of years. So there really is no hanging in per se. The station owns the show for 4, 5, maybe 6 years. So then it's the station's decision on how long they will hang in with it. When you go into first runs, such as Oprah, Wheel, Jeopardy, Nightlife, and such, it's a case of how well the ratings are doing. If you see a growth pattern with the show, the promotion behind it, and whether the bottom line is whether the advertisers are purchasing the show.
Absolutely, that is the bottom line, isn't it? Barry, I wonder, how much does it cost, or Joe, how much does it cost to do one episode of Hill Street Blues?
An hour program like Hill Street today is in the $1 million plus range.
And how much does it cost for a programmer to buy a rerun?
It depends, market by market, Eileen. So it depends on the marketplace. It depends on all the competitive factors of the marketplace.
Well, I don't want to put you on the spot, but just ballpark it for Boston.
Boston market today can pay up to $40,000, $50,000 for an episode of a strong program.
One episode?
Yes.
Now, all of you, I'd love to have your input on this. How, with all these programs selling for so very much money, how do UHF stations possibly afford to stay on the air today? It's very costly to buy reruns, syndication, isn't it?
It's extremely costly for a lot of the stations, but what happens when they have a successful show, it helps other day parts of that television station. Therefore, when the viewers tune in for that show, it's like appointment television. It'll back up into the show leading into it and also the show leading out to it. Hopefully, then they will be able to sample the station's programming.
People they stay on the dial, don't they?
They'll stay on the dial and they'll sample the programming.
Well, we know quality in MTM products, something like that, is very nice, but I'll tell you, what works is what sells. And King World is currently running, Wheel of Fortune. Let's take a look at some of the other programs they have as well.
Uh-oh, here it comes. There you are.
Have you heard the news? Have you heard the news? It's the Rock and Roll Evening News.
You have 15 seconds to work on it. Good luck.
Home on the Range.
You want a car? You got it. Exactly. You still don't believe it. You got the car, $17,211. Oh, don't strangle yourself.
I think it's amazing. The success of Wheel of Fortune is just incredible. Sid, why? Why is Vanna White a household word?
People just like Vanna. She's a cheerleader. They like to invite her into their homes. She's just become part of the show. I think the show has many elements, and all the elements fall together to make it a successful show.
You're making a lot of money on this show, aren't you?
Company is, yes.
Company, that's what I mean. But
yeah.
You're in charge of that, right?
Yes, I am.
And everybody just accepts it and accepts it at the price that you're offering it? I mean, in the beginning, in the old days,
Depends upon whether you're buying or selling. Really.
Well, I mean, but in the old days, could you have charged as much for Wheel of Fortune as you do now, or does the price go up with the market success?
The price goes up with the market success. It's all based on ratings. We always do a revenue analysis to show the television station how they can make money and therefore how they can afford to pay for our television shows, regardless of what show it is. And we try and do it in a very professional, scientific manner. And it's all corporate. It is all economics, as Joe said earlier. competitive nature does play a very important part of it. So,
well, you're in the talk show business too. We'll talk
Right.
about that when we come back, and we'll introduce you to the product of these other gentlemen. We'll also take your phone calls. There's the number. We'll be right back. You can talk back to those people who bring you television right after this.
It's been 10 years since an independent production company became the first to distribute its own product. And what a difference a decade makes. From a company with a couple of ideas and a comedy to sell, to year after year, show after show, producing and distributing some of the most successful programs ever in syndication. Now, as our first decade draws to a close, Embassy, clearly the leader.
We don't have a son, Louise. But don't worry, we can start all over again. You can give me another boy.
You better call Parcel Post. Because I've stopped making deliveries.
My box is yours from the Navy. I ain't seen these in years.
What's that?
Oh, that's my cup.
Yo, cup. How in the heck do you drink out of that?
Barry Thurston, Embassy. All right, you're in charge, Barry, of getting these shows into syndication. But where do the ideas come from?
Well, it's real easy to get shows like The Jeffersons and some of those
Yes,
that you just
I
saw
bet it
in a
is.
syndication, because you don't find too many shows that are that well written, that well cast, that well produced, and it makes it real easy. And that show had an 11-year run on the network before it came into syndication, and it's been in syndication for about 4 or 5 years now, running very successfully.
But where do the ideas come from? And is it a closed group that comes up continually with idea after idea? Are you more apt to buy an idea from someone who has success behind him than a newcomer on the block?
Well, our company basically creates all of the programming that we sell, so that we start from inception. We have a pool of 35 or 40 writer-producers who have been on staff for about a dozen years. Many new ones coming in, but some who have produced and written some of the most successful programs on television. And basically, most of the ideas do come out of this group of people in development. Now, they do talk to people on the outside, obviously, but I think that for the most part, our company creates the ideas ourselves.
How much does it cost to produce a sitcom?
Oh, I think today the average cost of a sitcom just starting out may be in the $350,000 to $400,000 per show range.
We'll open it up to the phones in a minute, but I first ask all of you to respond to this. There are some critics of television who say sitcoms are mindless entertainment, and the technology is up and running, but what about the program? That perhaps television doesn't serve the public good as it should. How do you all feel about that?
We're in the entertainment business, and if people want sitcoms, they'll get sitcoms. I mean, they'll decide, and they really are the ultimate decider of the whole thing, the whole business.
But how do you explain Jeopardy being on in this market twice on one station in the same day and people watching it? Can't you overkill a show? MASH, you can go into some towns and see it 4 times in one day.
Well, MASH has run in this town a couple of times a day. Our show, Different Strokes, is running twice a day. Markets all around the country, you see shows that are running more than once a day.
And the market will bear that kind of...
Sure.
Yeah.
The viewers will tell you.
There are different audiences from place to place in a schedule. The morning audience does not necessarily watch 7 to 8 o'clock. The afternoon audience does not necessarily watch at 11 o'clock, so there would be room for a show to play more than
Eileen,
one
we
time.
are in the golden age of television, and if you don't believe it, take a look at some of those programs that played in the 50s that we thought were excellent television. I'm not going to mention any names. You cannot watch them today. They would, a television audience today would turn them off like that.
Wait, I Love Lucy?
No,
Not
I'm
all
talking
of
about
them.
some of the so-called, I don't know what the word is, but the quality television of the 50s can't match up today for 5 seconds. And there was one big show that played on PBS recently, about 2 or 3 years ago. They brought it back. It was a play from the 50s. And they ballyhooed it, did a tremendous promotion job. Try to watch it on television. You couldn't get through it. And they didn't repeat. They were going to do a whole series of these. Didn't repeat.
It's interesting. We have a phone call. Let's see what our viewers have to say. Good morning. You're on Good Day.
Good morning. A two-part question. I read that Magnum PI was the top syndication in revenues, even more so than MASH. I was wondering if that was true. And the second part is, how does the residual scale work for the executive producers, writers, and actors once a show goes into syndication?
I mean, do they make as much money as the syndicator?
No, what percentage of their original per show episode do the residuals get as it goes into syndication?
All right, good. Who wants to take those, Bob?
Well, in the second part of the question, I think you have to, it's a scale with unions, number one, that's set up so everybody's treated fairly. And in terms of income for a show, I think you have to think of Hollywood and all of the companies as factories for producing entertainment. And many of the programs that we invest in don't make it. And we have huge investments that nobody ever sees on television. And when we find a hit, that pays for all of the development and all of the other overhead in the businesses to continue to look for good quality television shows.
Is there an escape for a losing show? Is there a place where you can bury it and still recoup some of your dollars with all of the options to change the dial today? Or do you simply have to sometimes just say, this isn't working, all the money's for naught?
We lose an awful lot of money on a bad show, and there's no way to duck that.
Really?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of development at every one of our companies that the shows never even get to pilot, where you've spent thousands and thousands of dollars, and who knows how many man-hours of the people working on those projects and ideas. And I would guess that if you look at the profit of the corporations that own all of the entertainment companies, they're not huge profit percentages versus the stations that they play on versus
but if you abort a
cable
show,
companies that own them.
Bob, if you abort a show before it ever gets to pilot, how do you know you haven't thrown a really good idea down the drain? Who's the gauge?
You don't know. I mean, you never know when if a good idea, and I believe that a good idea keeps coming back, and keeps coming back, whether it comes back in the same company it started with, it might be Embassy, Columbia, or MTM, or King World. It'll come up in some other place, Paramount, 20th Century Universal. A good idea will get on the air.
Yeah.
It's trying to find a good idea and implementing a good idea and finding the right cast and the right writers to work on them, and then the right sales companies to sell them to stations or networks.
It's a very complicated business.
Well, the networks start out with 10,000 projects every year. And you see maybe, what, 15 or 20, if that, get to pilot.
I don't think the viewers really do know that, but Bob, while we've been talking, you haven't shown some of your wares that you brought with you this morning, so can we take a look? Columbia Television, here's what they're responsible for.
Before work, he cheats during work, he cheats after work. He cheated on our honeymoon, he cheated on our anniversary. He cheated while I was in labor in the hospital. In the hospital. He has cheated practically every week of every month of every year of our entire marriage. But other than that, he has been a wonderful husband.
Ripley's Believe It or Not.
Bob, you're also obviously, just the name Columbia, you're responsible for an awful lot of movies as well. People will watch The Wizard of Oz over and over and over again, but will they watch The Natural or Jagged Edge thousands of times? Can you make your money back after purchase of a film like that?
Oh, I think so. I mean, I think The Natural will end up being a classic. I don't know if it will be in the same league as The Wizard of Oz. The Wizard of Oz is a gem for America. Just happens to be in the MGM library, but that's entertainment for everybody. I would think Joe Indelli would know more about some of the shows that I sell. I actually replaced him. Oh. And he was running this company long before I got here. And
what was he doing wrong?
I don't think he was doing anything wrong. The company had.
Well, why did he have to be replaced?
I don't think he was replaced. I think he chose to move on.
You guys, these are good friends, in case you haven't gotten that by now. What do those movies cost, Joe, to buy, to acquire?
For us, or you mean in syndication?
When you buy them to syndicate them, when you have the syndication rights, what does it cost the company?
Oh, most of them you produce yourself. So you're taking your own pictures, if you're Columbia or Paramount or so forth. You just have your own movies. The trick is getting those movies on the air. You know, E.T., for example, and some other movies, E.T. was shopped to every studio in Hollywood, and they all passed. And finally, Universal stepped up to the plate and went forward and shot the show. So you really are taking your own programs and putting them on the air, but the average cost of a movie today, I think, is about $16 million.
Oh, you have to run a lot to recoup your money, right, Sid?
But there are different markets you can go to. You can go to home video, you go to foreign distribution, you go to domestic distribution. And like Joe said, if it's your movies that you're producing, however, if you're not a movie producer like King World, we have to go out and buy movies, get distribution rights for movies. So therefore we get a distribution fee, and then we have to come up with money up front for the producer.
A big investment.
And then put together a package. So
Right.
it is a big investment.
Phone calls. We did not answer that gentleman's phone call. Magnum PI, highest gross?
One of the highest.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
It's way up there. There are about 7 or 8 shows, would you say, fellas, that have gone over $1 million
Yeah, MASH,
dollars a
Cheers,
negative in
Family
syndication.
Ties,
It's
perhaps.
probably grossed about, what, 200 million?
Yeah.
That's the first time they sold it. But some of the shows, such as MASH or the Jeffersons and others, are sold 2 and 3 and 4 times around, and as a result might even pass up Magnum in terms of total gross sales.
That's the key to it, if you can get the renewals after the stations use up all the runs.
Does the public like it, though? Don't they want some new programming?
No, they enjoy watching it. They enjoy watching the shows, and you can see it by the ratings. A good show will always play. Just like a good movie will always play.
I think the public enjoys the characters. We have a show on now called Facts of Life on NBC. It's NBC's longest running series. It's in its 8th year. And when the show came on the air, a lot of people looked at it and said, well, it's an interesting show, but I don't know if it'll make it or not. And the show hung on in year 2, year 3. The viewers started to get familiar with the characters. And once they get into the characters and the situations, they stay with them, and they grow up with those girls on the show.
Because they're family.
And when it comes into syndication, they want to see the earlier episodes to see when they were younger and smaller.
Sure.
Yeah, I understand. Do you take something off the shelf and say, let's give it a shot for a new generation?
Sure, it happens all the time.
Absolutely.
Like, let's give an example.
What's happening now?
Yeah, what's happening now?
What's happening now was produced on the network, was not necessarily released in syndication, and was remade again in first-run television and showed all over the country. And the back-end titles, or the titles that were on the network, are sold right along with the first-run titles.
Sure.
But you can go further back into, I guess, what we all believe are the classic days of television, and you can find Lucy, you can find The Little Rascals, you can find the
Gilligan's Island.
Sure.
Gilligan's Island.
Oh, the ultimate in that is the Bob Newhart show,
Sure.
which was on the air years ago, has come back now, and oddly enough, and this is very unusual, in its 5th season right now on the network, its numbers are bigger than it was the first year, this time around. So
Isn't that amazing?
that's the ultimate of coming back. That's durability of a star.
Yeah.
They had The Odd Couple, and they brought that back as a series that didn't last too long, but they did bring it back.
Let's take another
Tell me how you get the budget for all those prizes.
Good question.
Okay?
Right.
And is it true that Vanna White is going to be leaving the show?
Okay, we'll find out. How do you get those prizes? Are those trades you make for promotional?
No, we go out and buy most of those prizes.
Do you really?
Yeah, we really go out and buy. The producer goes out and buys
What's
most
the
of
budget of that show?
Oh, that show runs somewhere in the area of about $8 million a year.
Were there losses in the beginning, Sid?
No. We were very fortunate. Bob King would know about that. He actually launched it. But no, there were never any losses on the show. We were very fortunate, and the show was launched properly, and so we never showed a negative.
How about Vanna White? Is she leaving?
No.
No.
She will be there.
I'll tell you, she wouldn't be too smart if she left. It's a pretty good place to be, right? Wheel of Fortune almost didn't get on the air.
I guess that's probably true. There was a time frame in which Merv Griffin Productions, in dealing with the NBC network, had the ability to get the syndication rights or pass on the syndication rights, and that was a 60-day window, and they selected to get the rights to go into syndication. But if the Goodson Todman Company had given King World Price is Right, they would have passed on Wheel of Fortune and taken Price is Right, because Price is Right had higher ratings at the time. They didn't select to do that. Merv Griffin did select to go with King World, and the rest is history.
It's amazing. Really amazing. What you do is great fun, and there is a science to it. It's certainly a business I have no understanding of, but glad that you do. Thank you, Bob King, very much. Thank you, Sid Cohen, for being here. Barry Thurston, Joe Indelli, thanks a lot.